Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. Guys, I can hardly believe this, but this is video number 99, and the channel was a year old as of about 3 days ago. Anyway, today I want to talk about migrating QNAP LXD containers to an Ubuntu server. So this tutorial is about learning how to migrate QNAP Container Station LXD containers to an Ubuntu server running LXD. So QNAP networks are defined in the QTS Network and Virtual Switch application from the QTS Desktop. QNAP physical Ethernet adapters have names like ETH0, ETH1, ETH2, and ETH3, and you can even have more adapters if you have optional Ethernet adapter cards installed in your QNAP. So this is what those devices look like if I did an IP-A, or in this case, an ifconfig. You can see my ETH0, ETH1, ETH2, ETH3. I want you to notice that I do not have any IP addresses assigned for these, and we're going to see shortly why that's the case. So QNAP has these things called virtual switches, and as discussed on the channel before, a bridge is a device that connects two networks. That's a fundamental definition that we've been reviewing. And QNAP virtual switches are bridges that the user of QNAP network and virtual switch create when adding a virtual switch. So virtual switch and bridge, you can use those terms interchangeably. And at the QNAP CLI, virtual switches or bridges show up as devices QVS0, QVS1, QVS2, and so on, depending upon how many virtual switches you define on your system. And there's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship between the physical ETH devices and the virtual switches named QVS. So these virtual switches or bridges are required to allow Container Station LXD containers to obtain an address on your main LAN or whatever network is connected to the ETH physical adapter that the virtual switch uses. By default, LXD containers obtain a NAT address on a private LXD network. Just like if you use a Docker container, Docker by default gains an address on a private Docker network. And one of the things I focused on the channel before is how to take those containers and offer them out on your main LAN. So where exactly do virtual switches in QNAP point? Well, if you create a LXD container in Container Station and you select the network mode to be bridge, the use interface pull down points to which network you want to bridge to. And that's exactly what that is, and that's why the network mode there is called bridge. This creates an association within the LXD container that associates your connection with a device like QVS1 behind the scenes. And this is not portable because the bridge that you'll be using on the target Ubuntu server likely points to another bridge name like Bridge 0, and that was an example from my latest video about the cheap self-hosting server. So if you change your LXD container in Container Station to use NAT network mode, it will remove that association, and you can export a copy of the container that can be imported on your Ubuntu LXD server. So let's see these QVN bridges from the QNAP CLI. So again, as a reminder, the QVS type devices look like this. So these are the virtual switches. I have QVS 0, QVS 1, and QVS 2 on one of my NASs. And unlike the ETH device, notice these bridge devices have TCP/IP addresses. And I made a convention where I statically addressed these bridges at address 58. So this first one, QVS 0, is my IoT network, and it's at 192.168.30.58, whereas 172.16.1.58 is my main network, and QVS 2 here is at 192.168.80.58, and I refer to that as my cloud DMZ network, and that's where I host my applications that I share out to the public. So which QVS device goes to which virtual switch? Well, the addresses given to QVS 0, QVS 1, or QVS 2, as we've just seen, is the bridge address assigned to that particular virtual switch. This allows you to understand how the QTS network and virtual switch application functions to connect containers to different networks. Even though network and virtual switch allows for the creation of VLAN switches, they do not work in Container Station 2.x, and they actually will break Container Station. And although on the previous screen where I defined that QVS 0, 1, and 2 were pointing to different VLANs, what I really did was that Ethernet connector that virtual switch is associated with goes to a port on my switch where I have defined that port to have a profile for that VLAN. Anyway, you cannot create the VLANs in network and virtual switch and have them work in Container Station. It will break Container Station, at least in all versions of Container Station 2.x. So you can create LXD profiles for MAC VLAN connectivity of your Container Station containers, but this must be performed at the actual QNAP CLI level, as we've discussed in my other LXD tutorials. So again, the way to make a connection is from using the command line CLI LXC, and you'll be able to make profiles that'll connect to VLANs using the MAC VLAN protocol. So after listing your interfaces on your QNAP with ifconfig or IPA, you can easily associate the QVS devices with your virtual switch names in the QNAP network and virtual switch. So again, this is a reminder. Here's your QVS 0, 1, and 2, and here are the addresses. So I picked all 58 addresses because I wanted some degree of consistency for my sake. Now, when you go to network and virtual switch, here's the same addresses again, and I have one switch called Scott and Cat Network, and that turns out to be adapter 1 and 2. What did we say the adapters were? Well, those are the ETHs. So this is ETH 1 and 2 over here, but over here it's called QVS 1. So what I have is a adapter 1 and 2 are bonded together to make one connection using 802.3AD. And then here, my IoT network used address 192.168.30.58 for its bridge, but its bridge name really is QVS 0 that we just saw, and it points to adapter 3, which is ETH 3. And then finally here, 192.168.80.58 is really switch bridge QVS 2, and that really points to ETH 4. So that really draws everything together so you can understand how the ETH devices, those are the physical adapters in the third column, and then in the second column we have the QVS adapters, and those are the names of the virtual switches. And then in the first column, we have containers. Containers can be Docker, they can be LXD, they can be LXC, they could be actual VMs, and those can point to any one of these virtual switches, and they in turn point to the physical adapters. So this is really the same thing I've been describing on the channel, but QNAP tries to make this simpler with network and virtual switch. And even though there is a way to click over here in this column and add VLAN devices, don't do it, because if you do it, it's going to break Container Station. They'll work and they get added in here. It's just that Container Station does not yet deal with those in Container Station 2.x. And I think the current version of Container Station as of this tutorial is like version 2.61. Okay, so then what I'm suggesting is if you go into your Container Station and you go to create a container or even edit an existing container, if your network mode is set to bridge and you come down to the user interface and you click on that drop down menu, if you have multiple adapters defined, here's my adapter 1 and 2, which was Scott and Cat network, that's really QVS1. And then adapter 3 is really QVS 0, and adapter 4 is QVS 2. So this is a good way to associate these. And let me also point out something else. So if you create a container, and when you go in, you'll see that this MAC address is grayed out. If you want the same MAC address for your container every time the QNAP reboots or every time Container Station starts this container, then you want to click this double arrow thing over here, and it will bold this address. And what it does is it picks a random MAC hardware address, and it will use the same hardware address associated with this particular container. And that's going to be something very important to do. And then out on your network, as we've talked about in other videos, you're wanting to set a dynamic DHCP host address reservation. And by setting a host address reservation, you can set this MAC address to get the same IP address every time this container comes up. Okay? So then we want to make QNAP LXD containers portable. And I think we already really described what we're going to do. We're going to change your LXD container to NAT network mode if it's using the bridge mode. And the way we do that is we go back in to modify an existing container and we change the network mode from bridged to NAT. Now I understand that if you had an address out on the main network, now it's going to have this internal address, but hey, stick with me, we're getting here. So we're going to create a bridge profile from the QNAP command line. So you're going to SSH into your QNAP, and we want to use the admin account because this is important in terms of ownership of the internal structures. So SSH into your QNAP. It's probably address 192.168.1. whatever. Find out what the address with QFinder is and connect to that QNAP and get yourself a command line into the SSH shell. And once you do that, we're going to do a LXC profile create bridge profile. That's going to create a profile called bridge profile. You can pick your favorite name, but I just called it bridge profile here. And once you create that, then you're going to go in here and you're going to do an edit to that profile, and you're going to point to your correct QVS device that we went over in the previous slides. So we can do exactly this. You can copy this entire section here with the indents and everything and paste it into your command line, and this will edit that bridge profile to include all these things. But you're going to want to change this parent down here to be QVS, whatever it is that you need on that container to point to the right location. Okay? And then you're going to modify your container to use the new profile. And the way you're going to do that is LXC profile assign the name of your container. So whatever the LXD container is named in Container Station is what name you're going to want to put here. And case is significant, by the way. And then we're going to say default, comma, bridge profile. The default profile points to the correct location for the root file system, and the bridge profile, as you see up here, points to our bridge device QVS0, and that's how it does it, except it does it through a profile called bridge profile. And this, so that'll set the container back to get an address from the LAN like it did before, but it's going to refer through bridge profile. So now we've made our LXD container actually portable so that we can export it and import it on an Ubuntu server and make it run from there. So the next step is we want to back up the container on your QNAP. So again, we're going to connect to the SSH session on your QNAP, and we want to create the backup. So we're going to SSH to admin it the same thing again. And we're going to cd into share/container. And it is with a capital C. And once you get over there, I like to create like a folder to put my backups in. And I'm going to do a make-dir of backups. And I just chose a capital B. Again, Linux considers case highly important. And then I'm going to cd into backups. And then I'm going to stop my container name, right? LXC space stop, whatever container name. You can do the same thing by going into Container Station, highlighting your container and saying stop. That's the GUI way to do it. But this is the command line way to do it. Now that the container's stopped, we do a LXC export, whatever the container name is, to the container name.tar.gz, and that will create a backup file. So depending on the size of your container, this can come back anywhere between 2 or 3 minutes up to 20, 30, 45 minutes. Depends on how complex your container is and also how fast your NAS is. All right, now on the Ubuntu server, now that we've got a backup, we want to connect to the Ubuntu server with SSH. And that should be easy for you because you've got this Ubuntu server up. If your Ubuntu server is a desktop, then just launch a terminal in it, and that gives you your session. Assuming you've already changed the server Ethernet configuration to have a Bridge 0 device using NetPlan, and we covered that in my cheap self-hosting server tutorial, which was 2 videos ago. Watch that to learn how to change your Ethernet device to a bridge device called Bridge 0 in that tutorial. Once you've done that, then we can do a LXC profile create bridge profile on the Ubuntu node. And then we take the same thing that we've got from the other system, except this one looks just a little bit different. We're going to copy from the cat all the way to the EOF, and we are going to say the bridge type is bridge, or NIC type is bridged, but the parent is going to be Bridge 0. And now that it's Bridge 0, it'll point to this bridge that we created in this other video here. So instead of pointing to the other device on the QNAP, it'll point to Bridge 0 over here. But you see, since both containers, both the backup container and the original, are using bridge profile, it doesn't matter that this is different because this is one value on the QNAP, but it's a different value down here on the Linux node that we're moving to. So then we want to import the backup to LXD. And again, this will work because bridge profile exists on the QNAP copy and it exists on this new server as well. So you're going to have to move the backup to the new server, and one of the hints is use SFTP, a simple file transfer protocol. And I've got several videos where I talk about the use of SFTP and how easy it is to move files. But you're going to have to move the file from your QNAP over to this Ubuntu node before you can import it. So assuming you've moved the file already, then you're going to say LXC import whatever the container name is, .tar.gz, that backup file we created, right, over to container name. And you can change the name here because whatever name you put in is what it'll call it in your LXC list, but that's how you import the container. And when you're done importing the container, it won't be started, but you can turn around and do a LXC start and then give the name of the container. So in summary, we learned how to change a QNAP LXD container station container from bridged to NAT, and then create a LXD bridged profile to make it portable. We exported a backup of a container from the QNAP, and we created a similarly named bridge profile on the target Ubuntu system, and we imported the backup to the Ubuntu system LXD. Similar LXD profiles can be made for Mac VLAN, and I'm going to put all of these profile things in the show notes, and I'll also put a sample of how this is done using Mac VLAN for numbered VLANs. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification button. And guys, thanks for being with me all the way through video number 99.